Hello and welcome to this training. As you can see from the title, what we're going to be covering today is the hidden truth of consistency and procrastination. And as you can see from the overview, what we're going to be talking about more specifically is the illusion of perfection, the spiral of return, the collapse of streaks, the physics of fast restarts, the identity anchor, the anti-fragile loop, the review, and then your action items for the day or the next few days. So without further ado, let's get started and talk about the illusion of perfection. So you're most likely sold a fantasy. Every self-help book, every dopamine trap app, every influencer whispering the same poison. If you just stick to the plan perfectly, you'll finally get what you want. Well, nobody mentions the snap of disappointment when you inevitably break your streak, or the guilt that eats your motivation alive. A parade of checklists as if discipline is something you collect, not something you fight for. It's more than disappointment. You carry that failure like a rock in your shoe, pretending you don't notice as it destroys your self-esteem. And the more you obsess over perfect records, the deeper the cuts when you miss. Now, the guilt piles on with every slip and makes you hesitate the next time. It turns "I missed a day" into "maybe I'm not cut out for this." And the more you try to avoid falling off, the more every stumble haunts you until quitting starts to sound like mercy. You try to cure the pain with more tracking, more systems, new apps. You hunt the feeling of control, mistaking micromanagement for mastery. You buy the latest fail-proof planner, convinced that this one will finally break the curse. And the more rules you stack, the more ways you invent to fail, until the whole process becomes a monument to your self-doubt. Now, perfectionism isn't discipline, it's fear dressed up as ambition. You get obsessed with not being seen slipping. You'd rather show a perfect front than risk looking foolish for trying and failing. And so you curate your public persona, hiding every flaw, and the world sees your highlight reel, not your empty mornings or the nights you basically scroll till you fall asleep. You act as if discipline is second nature, but the truth is it's always been a street fight with yourself. You feel alone because everyone else seems to be pulling it off when really they're just hiding the same mess. Perfection is a mask that gets heavier every time you wear it. You wake up tired not from the work, but from holding the mask in place, and the energy it takes to maintain your streaks is the same energy that could have fueled real progress. One bad day, one missed action, and the mask shatters. All that effort is gone in an instant, or so it feels. Now, streaks, on the other hand, are the badge of honor everyone chases, not realizing that it's a trap. You're trained to worship unbroken chains, to see each red X as proof that you belong, but a streak isn't a ladder, it's really a leash. And when the streak breaks, you don't just feel behind, you feel erased, like you never did any of it, and the loss is sharper than the gain ever was. And you binge, you bail, you start fresh on Monday, and each restart gets harder as you collect more failed attempts. You end up mourning the perfect run instead of celebrating the days that you actually showed up. A streak is just numbers, pixels, a sugar hit for your ego. It's not grit, it's not real growth, it's not real change. You can hit a streak and stay exactly the same inside. Brittle, fragile, just waiting to break. And what actually matters is what happens after you fail, not how long you kept it together. Procrastination is the other side of the same sickness. You fantasize about a future where you never delay, never hesitate, never dodge the work, and that fantasy is really poison. You fill the void with fake action, sorting files, reorganizing the desk, getting in the right mindset. It feels productive, but it's air. Every checklist you finish becomes another excuse to not do the actual hard thing, and you let yourself get pulled away by anything that's shiny, convincing yourself that you're making real progress. The inner critic starts whispering, you label yourself lazy, undisciplined, not built for this, and every harsh word just digs the hole deeper, making it harder to climb out next time. Eventually, you stop fighting. Procrastination becomes an identity, not just an occasional habit. So here's where it all gets sticky. Once you call yourself inconsistent or a procrastinator, you start to build your life around proving it true. The label seeps into everything. To showcase how dangerous this is, this same concept happens in detective work and medicine. It's called confirmation bias, and this is when someone forms an early hypothesis or label like "this person is the suspect" or "the patient has this disease," and then subconsciously looks for evidence that confirms their initial belief while dismissing contradictory information. For detectives, this can lead to tunnel vision, where they focus only on a single suspect and build a case around them rather than objectively evaluating all evidence. For doctors, this manifests as diagnostic anchoring, where an initial diagnosis frames all subsequent thinking, potentially causing them to misinterpret symptoms that don't really fit their original assessment. You're literally creating proof out of thin air to confirm your original label. Just as calling yourself a procrastinator creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, a detective who labels someone guilty or a doctor who labels a condition too early may unconsciously build their entire investigation or treatment plan around proving that initial label correct, rather than remaining open to new evidence. And so each time you fall off, the identity grows roots. I always do this, you think, and that story drags you down faster than any missed day ever could. You get so used to losing that winning feels like a fluke, an accident, something you can't trust. And sometimes you cling to failure because it's safe. It means nobody expects more from you, not even you. But you're not your patterns, not unless you refuse to fight them. The only thing stopping you from writing a new story is the willingness to pick up the pen. The second you act against your old label, even for 5 minutes, you prove that it's a lie. And every comeback, no matter how small, is another crack in the old identity. Social media is also a weapon. You see other people's streaks, their sunrise workouts, their spotless routines, and you forget that you're watching their commercial, not their real life. You measure your worst days against their highlights and it guts your self-worth. You want them to slip just so you don't have to feel so alone in your own struggle. You start hiding your own setbacks and the shame multiplies in the dark. The ones you admire most aren't perfect. They're just experts at returning so quickly you never even noticed that they left. You only see the wins because they don't broadcast the lapses. That doesn't mean they don't have them. The more you admit your own mess, the more real your progress actually becomes. The second you see it for what it is, you get to set your own rules. No one's coming to save you, you save yourself. And the minute you take that back, you can actually breathe again, and the pressure lifts and the game changes. Here's what they don't tell you. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to come back. That's it. The hero, quote unquote, isn't the one who never falls. It's the one who rises every time. The second you realize this, the whole game changes. The timer resets every time you restart, not every time you mess up. The freedom to return is the only perfection worth chasing. All progress is built on restarts. You can finally let go of the shame. You can finally start moving again. When you stop chasing streaks and start building resilience, you'll see just how much more you can actually do. And the next part of this journey will show you how to turn that into unstoppable momentum. So let's talk about the spiral of return. So let's kill the myth once and for all. Progress isn't linear. It never was, never will be. You'll have weeks where you feel untouchable, crushing your routine, staying on top of your work, feeling like you finally cracked the code, and then out of nowhere, life punches you. Family drama, insomnia, random life stuff. That's the real world. No one escapes it. Not the billionaires, not the monks. The difference is the winners come back faster. That's the entire game. How quickly do you come back? Not do you always stay on track? Not are you the world's most consistent human, but how long does it take you to pick yourself up? Most people treat falling off as some existential crisis. They throw the whole thing away the second they break their streak. But the best? They just reset, sometimes in the same hour, sometimes mid-sentence, all with zero judgment and zero guilt, because they realize both judgment and guilt will keep them there stuck for longer. One of the wildest secrets about real discipline is that it's less about never slipping and more about how tiny you let your lapses become. You eat the cookie and you get back on your diet at the next meal, not on Monday. You binge Netflix and you're back to work before guilt becomes this humongous monster you have to fight. Some people seem bulletproof, but they're not. They've just gotten so good at course correcting that their lapses are basically invisible, even to themselves. So there's a great example of this from the aviation field when a plane flies, it doesn't follow a perfectly straight path. The pilot sets a flight plan, a general route, but along the way, wind currents, turbulence, and air pressure differences constantly push the aircraft slightly off course. Now, the plane might drift a few degrees north because of crosswind and then slightly south when adjusting for air traffic or jet streams. The key insight is this: the plane is off course most of the time, but it's continuously correcting. The autopilot system constantly measures deviation from the intended path using instruments like GPS, gyroscopes, and inertial navigation systems. It then makes thousands of micro adjustments per minute, tiny course corrections, so subtle that you'll never notice, to bring it back on trajectory. If you looked at the actual path of a long-haul flight, plotted precisely, it would never be a perfectly straight line. It would be a very wiggly, meandering curve that averages towards the goal. The destination is reached not by staying perfectly on track, but by noticing and correcting whenever you're not. That's why pilots say you're never on course, you're always correcting course. It's a philosophy of precision through flexibility. So hopefully you're seeing the deeper metaphor here. Success, growth, and even moral integrity are navigated the same way. No one stays perfectly aligned with their plan. You drift, you notice, you adjust, and you repeat. What matters isn't perfection, it's feedback and correction. Another useful example here is relationships. They work in a similar way. In a way, relationships are built on daily recommitments. You don't choose someone once, you choose them over and over, sometimes consciously, sometimes without realizing it. Every day you get to decide in thousands of small ways whether to lean in or pull away. Relationships don't collapse from one betrayal, unless it's really bad, or one lack of effort. They usually erode through the absence of these micro decisions. The truth is that every relationship is always either decaying or deepening, depending on how you show up in those tiny moments that no one else sees. So you're always falling slightly out of alignment with the other person, and hundreds, if not thousands, of small acts bring you back together. The couples that last aren't the ones that never argue or never fall out of alignment for a while. They're the ones that return faster to each other. And so even when it's not deliberate, you're still recommitting in subtle ways. These aren't always dramatic and conscious choices, even though they could be, but most of the time they're the quiet renewals of bond that keep it alive. And most people think relationships end when someone stops loving, but they usually end when someone stops recommitting, when they stop doing the small, basically invisible things that say, I still choose this. And that's the paradox of love too. It's both feeling and discipline. It's passion, yes, but also the deliberate work of returning to center again and again through boredom, irritation, distraction, and temptation. No couple stays aligned all the time. What matters isn't that you drift, it's how quickly and how often you return. And every relationship in the end is just a series of corrections back to connection. So most people misunderstand momentum. They also think it's something you build once and then coast forever. In reality, momentum is fragile as hell. It breaks. Your only job is to really catch the pieces and start rolling again. The quicker you restart, the less you bleed motivation. That's how you win the real race, not by running the whole marathon without stopping, but by shortening every pit stop, every bathroom break, every stumble. The longer you wallow in your failure, quote unquote, the heavier the restart feels. You have to drop the drama. It's not about you, it's just about the next step. Here's the inside-out truth. Procrastination is just a pause. It's not a personality trait, just a gap between want and do. That's all it is. The more you understand that, the less power it has over you. And the people you think never procrastinate still stall. They just shrink the pause so small you'd miss it if you blinked. 5 minutes maybe, a deep breath. They just move. And so you can procrastinate for a week and still win if you come back without guilt. One deep work sprint after a lost day is more valuable than a month of low effort pretending. So the second you notice you're stalling, do something tiny. Open the document, write the first bad sentence. Momentum can start with garbage. Perfection only kills it. So procrastination is an action, not an identity. There is no real procrastination if you think about it, because even when you're procrastinating, you're actually doing something. You're taking action, which means you can take the right action. The moment you treat it as a thing that happened and not who you are, you've already beaten half the battle. So stop saying I'm a procrastinator and try I'm someone who restarts quickly. The words you use change your self-concept, and that changes your outcomes. Every return, even a clumsy one, is proof that you're not your worst habit. So your comeback speed is a skill. You can train it. You don't have to be born with it. The first time, maybe it takes a month. Next time, a week. Eventually, you'll be back in the fight in hours or minutes. The trick is making it automatic. You can literally rehearse bouncing back. Mess up on purpose and force yourself to restart. Flood your brain with proof that the world doesn't end when you fall off. Try skipping a workout, then doing the next one anyway. Skip a reading session and then pick up the book the next day. You're proving to yourself that you can control the story. Each time you return, the neural pathway gets smoother and you carve an imprint in your mind that basically says, I always come back. None of this works if you can't forgive yourself instantly, so self-flagellation is for people who want to suffer, not people who want to win. Let go of the drama, drop the shame, and move on. Every comeback is a fresh start, not a deduction from your score. So what matters now isn't what you missed, but what to do next. The future is always more important than the past. So the best way to understand the spiral is to see it play out in the wild. Think about athletes. The ones who melt down after a bad game rarely recover. The ones who shake it off mid-match become champions. And think about creatives. Writer's block isn't fatal if you keep typing garbage until it breaks. Think about entrepreneurs. Failure is just another Tuesday. They file for bankruptcy and then start again the next quarter with a new idea, yet with the same stubbornness. So ordinary people see setbacks as a sign to slow down or quit. High performers use the same setback as fuel. Proof that they're still in the fight. They're less emotional, more mechanical, but also freer. And so the spiral isn't a downward cycle. It's more so a helix that keeps looping upward as long as you keep returning. So what looks like falling apart is actually how you build anti-fragile strength. You don't get better by avoiding collapse. You get better by learning to recover in public without shame. So ask yourself, when's the last time you surprised yourself by coming back faster than you thought possible? If you haven't yet, it's time to start collecting those stories. They're the only real measure of progress. Write them down, catalog your comebacks. The more evidence you build, the less any one slip can hold you hostage. And eventually your default response to falling off will be, I always come back. And that's the spiral working in your favor. Now, once you get obsessed with the return instead of the streak, your relationship to failure transforms. And the shame starts to feel foreign, almost funny, and you start looking at setbacks as a weird kind of opportunity. There's something powerful waiting for you in that collapse. So let's talk about the collapse of streaks. Everyone feels the snap. You're killing it for 6 days, 3 weeks, maybe a month straight. The calendar looks clean, the habit tracker is green, and you start thinking you're finally one of those consistent people. Then one night, you're tired. One weekend, you're traveling, something derails you, and suddenly the streak is all of a sudden dead. It's infuriating, embarrassing, demoralizing, but that break, that's the real teacher, and it's where everything actually begins. The collapse isn't just missing a day, it's the avalanche of thoughts that follow. The voice in your head that says you never had it anyway. You think maybe you were faking it the whole time. Maybe you're doomed to cycle through hope and shame forever. The collapse forces you to confront who you actually are when your system fails. You realize willpower isn't infinite and streaks aren't armor. This is the only moment you're forced to be honest. The mask drops and what's left is the actual you, the person who has to decide if the story ends here or if it's just the middle. Now, what separates people isn't how long they keep a streak, it's how they act the second it dies. That's where all the leverage is. That's the hinge on which your progress swings. And there's a moment of absolute freedom when you fall off. You can get sad and bitter, or you can get up and get better. Most never even realize it's an actual choice. And so the more times you let a collapse spiral into quitting, the more your brain wires itself for surrender. You're just conditioned, and that's fixable. Now that you see how collapse exposes the truth, let's break down what the streak was actually giving you in the first place and why losing it feels like getting punched in the face. So a streak gives you fake certainty. It's the illusion that you're on a moving walkway, coasting forward as long as you don't trip. The feeling is addictive. Your self-worth gets tangled up with that number ticking upwards. But you start living for the streak, not for the change you actually want. And so once the streak is your identity, you're a slave to it. You guard it like treasure, fearing any crack will expose you. You say no to opportunities or to spontaneity or to anything that could put the chain at risk, and it shrinks your life instead of expanding it. Habits become prison bars instead of building blocks, and the game stops being about who you're becoming and starts being about not screwing up. Even if you keep the chain going, it eventually feels empty. There's no joy, only pressure, only tension, only anxiety that tomorrow could ruin everything. You keep growing out of obligation instead of love. Does that sound like discipline to you or survival? And you start resenting the very thing that you set out to love. Nobody tells you this at the beginning. When the reward evaporates and all that's left is the failure, you have a decision: spiral or salvage. And here's where the people who make real change are born. The first hour after you break a streak is everything. The next move you make is a fork in the road, and it will predict your next week, your next year, maybe your whole life. Do you punish yourself or do you experiment? Do you hide or do you recalibrate and come back? Do you want to know the real cheat code? It's speed. Not speed as in frantic movements, but in how quickly you can switch from "I failed" to "I'm back." Shrink the window and make it automatic. The faster you move on, the less pain you drag with you. Some people make a physical ritual out of it. Snap a rubber band, take a cold shower, do 10 push-ups. It's not about the action itself, it's about the signal. Telling your brain, reset now, not later. Build the comeback into the collapse. If you miss a workout, text a friend and book the next one right away. Skip a day of writing, then jot down one raw, ugly sentence just to keep the gears moving. The streak is dead, so what? Mourn it for 5 minutes and then bury it, because the streak doesn't really matter. What matters is the person you become in the process. So let it go with intention, and if you let it haunt you, it will. Every time you come back, you teach your brain that failure isn't the end, it's just a checkpoint. Each rapid return is basically a vote for the new identity, the kind of person who always finds a way back no matter what. And the reason this works is because the streak mindset makes your entire identity very brittle. One break and you feel broken, but if you train for recovery, you become unbreakable. Build collapse-proof routines, not just habit streaks. Expect the breakdown and then engineer emergency procedures for when you fall off, so you're not improvising in a shame spiral. So write out your 3-step recovery protocol before you ever need it. For example, admit the streak is dead out loud, take one small step that reconnects you to your goal, and then celebrate the restart. So put the protocol somewhere you can see it easily, and don't trust your future self to remember, because the fog of guilt will roll in. This isn't necessarily for everyone, but for others it can work wonders. Basically, tell someone your plan, give them permission to call you out and keep you accountable when you disappear. Most importantly, you have to look at this as a scientist. Treat every collapse as data. What triggered it? Where did your system fail? How could you spot the signs sooner next time? Every streak collapse contains the code for a better system. Don't waste it. Extract the lesson, tweak the plan, and then move on. The more collapses you process, the more data you have, the more foolproof you make the plan, and the faster you'll get at rebuilding, until returning becomes second nature. Now that you've built your own comeback system, there's an even deeper lever you can pull. The art and science of fast restarts. Get ready for the mechanics of the fastest bounce backs in the world. So now that you've built your own comeback system, there's an even deeper lever you can pull. The art and science of fast restarts. Now, you want to build a life that doesn't collapse just because you paused. That means obsessing over the speed and reliability of your restarts. The world rewards people who can recover fast, people who can pivot, bounce, re-engage, and all of that without any self-flagellation. Every time you cut your downtime short, you stack compound interest on your progress. It's that simple. The only metric that really matters is how small can you make the window between stopping and starting again. People overthink everything except this. The best in the world build their days around snapping back. You shouldn't care about the streak. Obsess over the rebound. Start tracking not your success rate, but your recovery speed. How many hours, minutes, seconds until you move again? Get weird about it. Celebrate the 5-minute restart as hard as you once celebrated the 30-day streak. And over time, you want your average gap to shrink. Not zero, but shrinking. Perfection doesn't exist, but pace does. And so once you're addicted to measuring speed, you need tools to make it even faster. And that's where the real leverage actually lives. You need a kit of real-world, field-tested moves for bouncing back. Don't rely on willpower or vague promises. Build rituals, triggers, and routines that force you back into motion, whether you feel like it or not. If you feel paralyzed, then shrink the action until it's impossible not to start. Do one push-up, write one ugly line, wash one dish. The power isn't in the size, it's in the re-engagement. So lower the bar until you're basically embarrassed. If you're not embarrassed by how small the action is, you're not doing it right. Once you move, momentum does the rest. If it feels dumb, you're on the right track. The dumbest possible action repeated fast is more effective than the best action delayed forever. Change your scenery or change your state, but don't stay stuck. Move rooms, go outside, splash cold water on your face. Break the physics of inertia with physical action, not more thinking. Make move first, analyze later your new rule. The mind loves to stall, but the body can drag it along. Build tiny restarts into your day. Stand up every hour, do a quick walk after every call, hit a reset button before you spiral into doom scrolling, and don't trust yourself to remember. Set up systems that actually call you out. Meaning, again, you can, for example, tell a friend to text you at 6 p.m. and ask what you restarted today. Or use an app that makes you check in. If you can't be trusted, outsource the trust until you can. Or post your comeback publicly. Yes, even if it's ugly. The more people know, the faster you'll move. Or compete with someone. Make those restarts a game of some sort. Now, those tactics don't mean anything if you treat every comeback like a shameful secret. You've got to shift your identity down to the story you tell yourself about who you are. Most people wait until they feel ready before coming back. You can't afford that luxury. The emotional gap is always bigger than the physical gap, so move anyway. Readiness is a myth, and motivation is a parasite. If you let feelings set your schedule, you're always stuck at zero. So decide now that you're the kind of person who comes back. Not sometimes, not when it's easy, but every single time. The people who move fastest are the ones who never let their self-respect depend on a perfect run. Write it out, make it your motto, repeat it when you fall, drill it into your skull until it's automatic, and surround yourself with comeback artists and study the people who never stay down. So, for example, Robert Downey Jr., from addiction to arrest and Hollywood exile to becoming Iron Man and one of the highest paid actors alive. Another example is Conor McGregor. Regardless of what you think of him now, he rose from welfare to world champion, crashed under fame and ego, and then rebuilt his body and brand repeatedly. His comebacks are messy but magnetic, and to a degree, he has proved that audacity can be a renewable resource. Steve Jobs, for example, was fired from his own company, wandered through failure, returned years later to turn Apple into a cultural empire. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school team, retired twice, came back twice, and dominated both times. J.K. Rowling was an unemployed single mother on welfare, rejected by 12 publishers, and then built the most successful book franchise in modern history. Nelson Mandela was 27 years in prison and then walked out free without bitterness and became president. The faster you restart, the less any single failure matters. Eventually, the comebacks are so quick, nobody even notices you actually slipped. And that's how reputations are really made, not by never missing, but by moving so fast you look invincible from the outside and you no longer fear falling off because you've trained yourself to love the return. When you stop dreading the reset and start engineering it, your whole experience of progress changes. And now it's time to explore how identity cements all of this, so comebacks aren't just a tactic, but a core part of who you are. So let's talk about the identity anchor. So every streak ends eventually. Plans fall apart, systems break, motivation fades. What stays when everything else slips is identity. That's the real anchor. Until you become the kind of person who gets back up no matter what, every trick or tactic is just a temporary fix. Real change happens when your self-image refuses to stay down. Identity is just the story you tell yourself over and over until it feels like truth. A lot of people are stuck in loops like I always quit, or I can't stay consistent, or I procrastinate. Every time you repeat those lines, you basically carve the path deeper. The brain loves consistency. Once it believes you're a certain kind of person, it starts searching for proof. So if you say I'm someone who always comes back, it will start building a case, even if it has to stretch the evidence. But if you keep saying you're unreliable, you'll act it out without even realizing it. Your brain wants the world to match your story, no matter how damaging it really is. Once you see that, you can start rewriting those stories. The same mechanism that traps you can also free you. So forget about positive thinking. It doesn't stick without behavior. Instead, you need to act like the person you want to be, even if and especially when you don't believe it yet. So people think they need to believe something before they act on it. That's the have, do, be mindset. You need to be in order to do so that you can have. Behavior pulls belief along for the ride. Do tiny comeback actions daily. Write them down. I got back to work after wasting 10 minutes scrolling, or I hit the gym after missing 2 days. Small steps build the pattern, and collect these small recoveries until it's impossible to deny who you're becoming. When you've got pages of proof, it's hard to still call yourself a quitter. Each note adds weight to a new self-image. Slowly, the story shifts from I fall off to I always return. Now, most people only record their wins, their perfect days. You're gonna do something different. You will track the bounce backs. That's how you train for consistency. It's not easy to look at your mess without shame, but that's what breaks it. When you face it honestly, you can take control of it. And every comeback is proof that you're not fragile. You start to see failure as part of the game, not the end of it. And once you start collecting this proof, you make recovery automatic. But there's another layer, building triggers that make it effortless to re-engage. So don't depend on willpower. Build reminders that pull you back when you slip. Design your world to wake you up. So use objects, sounds, or words that ground you fast. Maybe it's a certain song you only play when restarting. Maybe it's a note on your mirror. Find a few that basically click and make them rituals. Some people use a ring or a bracelet they touch when they start drifting. The physical cue basically interrupts the old pattern. So rearrange something in your space when you recover. Move your chair, step outside, light a candle. Basically just tell your brain that the story is actually changing. And talk to yourself out loud. It can be weird, but it works sometimes because sound hits the nervous system differently than just thought. And you can try recording messages to your future self and remind yourself of who you are when things get rough. Those moments become anchors too. With these cues in place, you won't need as much effort to restart, but the next level is transformation. So resilience means you recover. Antifragility means that you get stronger each time you do. That's the real goal. See every setback as training. Each recovery cuts the lag between fall and return, and what used to take a week now takes a day. What ruined a month now barely ruins an afternoon. So growth here compounds. Every bounce builds momentum. It's not a straight line, but rather a curve that accelerates over time. And soon you'll feel untouchable, not because you never fail, but because nothing keeps you down for long. And that's the goal. Eventually your story spreads and others see how you handle setbacks and mirror it. Real leadership isn't about winning all the time. It's about showing others that it's safe to lose and start again. The effects last longer than any flawless streak. You teach endurance by basically living it. And so when you reach this stage, chaos stops feeling threatening. Every failure becomes fuel, and the mess turns into material for mastery. And that's when consistency stops being a struggle and becomes your nature. So let's talk about the anti-fragile loop. So most people think a setback means they failed, like they've lost something vital. But what if every mistake, relapse, or act of self-sabotage could make you stronger instead of weaker? That's the difference between being resilient and being anti-fragile. Resilience means you recover. Anti-fragility means that you use the hit as fuel. You don't just survive the failure, you feed on it and come back later and better. Every time life knocks you down, it drops off a lesson in disguise. Inside the mess is always a chance to adapt, evolve, and return with more power. You study it, extract the lesson, and come back better prepared. So treat each relapse like a personal workshop. Get specific. What broke? What worked? What's the next version of your system? These questions turn failure into data, especially if you actually sit down, think, and write down the answers. So keep a running log of every crash and write down what you learned, how you recovered, and what you'll do next time. And over time, that becomes your personal codebook for handling chaos. Now, most of your best insights will come from what breaks, not what works. Systems evolve under stress. So when your old plan fails, make a smaller, smarter one. If you can't keep a full morning routine, for example, you can build a 2-minute version that you can't miss. That flexibility will beat that feeling of perfection. So try new things. The more you test, the faster you learn what actually works. And these tweaks and insights create leverage, but leverage is useless without action. So you've got to use it to replace guilt with progress and start compounding. So real progress isn't about how hard you push one time, but about what lasts. It's about what builds on itself over time. Trying harder is easy. Failing smarter is rare. So stack your lessons, because after a year, you'll be miles ahead of anyone still chasing perfect streaks. You've been tested more, learned more, and hardened your foundation. Now, your brain forgets pain fast. So keep your lessons visible and reread your crash log and notice the patterns. They're a literal map of your evolution. And mark every comeback with something small but deliberate, like a note or a journal log or a meditation. It reminds you that another layer's been added to who you are. Each round makes your recovery faster and smoother, and you build flexibility and quiet confidence. Shame loses power because proof is replacing it. And you'll start to realize you're tough to break and quick to rebuild. and your bar for what's normal will rise, and you'll stop wishing for easy days because you know difficulty is where the upgrades actually happen. And this is the engine behind transformation. Now it's time to make it automatic so it keeps running even when you're tired or distracted. That brings me to automation. Build your anti-fragile loop so it runs on autopilot. Set reminders to check your log and let tools instead of willpower keep the system alive. So have a ready-made checklist for setbacks. What triggered this? What worked last time? What can I change now? And don't rely on memory when you can rely on structure. And treat it like brushing your teeth. Non-negotiable. Review, reflect, and adjust on schedule. Every restart should come with more insight, more control, more speed, and each loop should upgrade the system. Over time, the pattern becomes self-fueling. Setbacks aren't detours, they're the road itself. The dips get shorter, the rebounds get faster, and eventually relapse barely registers because you recover too quickly for it to matter. That's the anti-fragile loop, a system that converts pain into performance, but it only works in motion. Thinking about it changes nothing. Acting on it changes everything. So start the loop, write down your last crash, pull a lesson from it, and adjust one thing, and restart today. What counts isn't how many times you fail, but how quickly you restart and how much stronger you are when you actually do. That's when you'll realize consistency and procrastinations aren't about never failing, but rather the constant, never-ending, boring, repetitive, and most importantly, inevitable course correction of failing and coming back all the time. That's all it is. So with that being said, let's go over the review. We talked about the illusion of perfection, the spiral of return, the collapse of streaks, the physics of fast restarts, the identity anchor, the anti-fragile loop, the review, and now your action items for the day or the next few days. First, sit down and write out your last 3 collapses or relapses, and for each, document exactly how long it took you to restart, what story you told yourself, and what you learned. And this is the first step in seeing your real patterns and grabbing control of your comeback cycle. Then build your comeback system today. Write a 3-step protocol for what you'll do next time you fall off and put it somewhere you'll see it often. Finally, the next time you inevitably fall off, whether it's today, tomorrow, or next week, catch yourself in the act. Start your comeback immediately, even if it's small. Just do something. The return is the only streak that matters. With that being said, I hope this was enjoyable and I hope it was valuable. If it was, give the video a like, comment below, let me know what you enjoyed, what you want to see next, and make sure to subscribe to see more. If you want to work with me, book a call from the second link in the description. And if you want this document along with this training, join the free community from the first link in the description. Again, thank you for being here, and I'm going to see you in the next one.